Also should be clear and clean. They're not cracked or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. I'm gonna make sure that my low beams are working as well as my high beams, okay? This light right here, you can call it either a marker light or an indicator light. So if I call it a marker light, I need to tell the examiner that it also serves as a turn signal in the four-way flasher. If I call it an indicator light, then I need to tell it it also serves as a four-way flasher. So they take either one, okay? I'm in the habit of saying it's a marker light. Amber in color, not cracked or broke, properly mounted, secured. It also should be in good working condition. And it serves as a turn signal and a four-way flasher, okay? Then I got a little reflector on the side here. That's amber in color, it's not cracked or broke, and it's properly mounted and secured. It's just a reflector, so it's not in good working condition because it's just a reflector. Reflectors don't work. It's just a reflector, okay? They used to do the license plate, but there's no more point for license plate neither. That's gone too. So my lights, then I'm gonna just make sure that I look underneath my truck, and I'm gonna make sure that I don't have any hanging wires or belts, and I'm also looking for leaks, so I don't wanna see any kind of puddles down there whatsoever. Puddles are indicators of leaks, okay? From there, we go ahead and we pop the hood. So I think it was already unlatched. And then we start off on the passenger side. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off by checking all my hoses up here and any electrical wires. All my hoses, there's the terminology we like to use is, there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks, and they're all properly mounted and secured. Everything is properly mounted and secured, right? Even you. You're properly mounted and secured. And then all my electrical wires, I don't see any exposed or any spliced wires. They're all properly mounted and secured, okay? Then I'm gonna come on down to my alternator. My alternator, I'll just say that there's no missing bolts. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. I'm gonna check the electrical connections to my alternator, making sure I don't see any exposed or spliced wires on those. They're all properly mounted and secured. Then the last thing I'm going to talk about on my alternator is it is belt driven. So I'm going to take a look at my alternator belt, making sure it's not ripped, torn, or frayed, and there's no more than 3/4 of an inch play at the center of the belt, okay? Then I'm going to come on down. Now, we can either test on one of these day cabs or a sleeper. So the day cab, they only seat two, right? There's no sleeper in the back. The big ones that have the berth in the back, we call those sleepers, okay? If you happen to test on one of these short ones, the water pump is on this side compared to all the sleeper trucks, the water pump is on the other side. So on this truck here, the water pump is here, okay? Here's our water pump. And my water pump, anything that can possibly leak, they want to hear not leaking in your description, okay? So my water pump, it's not cracked, broken, or leaking, and it's properly mounted and secured. My water pump is belt driven as well, so I'll check the belt the same way I did my alternator belt. Okay, cool.
Would you describe the water pump, the water hose?
Yeah, we could do our hose as well. And then I'm gonna check my hose to the water pump, making sure there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. It's properly mounted and secured, okay? Then I'm gonna come on back to my exhaust. My exhaust, it's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. All my clamps are in place. None of them are missing. Signs of leaks on our exhaust are gonna be black carbon or soot buildup. Those are signs of leaks on your exhaust, okay? And then we need to name our DPF filter back there. We can't see it, but we need to talk about it, okay? And that stands for diesel particulate filter. So I'm just gonna say my DPF filter, that's also not cracked, broken, or leaking, and it is properly mounted and secured, okay? And I believe that is it for this side. Yes. Yeah, on this truck, there it is. On this truck, yeah. There it is right there. On the sleepers, you can't see them. Yeah, so on this truck, yes, that is the DPF filter. Okay? Very good. Very good.
Hey, Tommy, so let me ask, check this out. when we say exhaust, are we talking from the turbo
No,
back or
just
is this
the
off
no,
of
no,
the-
no, just the exhaust from behind the turbo.
From
and
behind
back.
the turbo back?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Okay. We don't have. This is an intake breather.
Because I saw one of the other inspectors when he did it. It looked like he touched this.
No.
And I was wondering, okay, is it just from the
No,
tip of the
that's-
turbo back?
That's air intake for the turbo.
Okay, good.
And then, but so we're just talking about the exhaust from the turbo back.
turbo back. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Everything else they want us to do on the other side. Okay, so I'll come around and do this on the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead. Pretty much, you can do this in any order that you want. I'm gonna start from the left and work my way back, and I'll do the whole upper half. This just helps me not forget things or not miss things. You know, we keep it in some kind of order. So, but you can bounce around if you wish. Just like I said, it just makes it easier to miss things. Okay?
Hey, can I ask a question before
Yes.
you get started?
Yes.
That's what I'm throwing it off.
Yes.
You see that bolt missing right here on that
On the coolant reservoir?
If that was missing during our test, do we need to call that out?
If you see it, you can call it out.
Because I had asked the other cat, and he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, no." I said,
You can call it out. I mean, it's just gonna let the examiner know that, hey,
You paying attention.
He really is paying
Okay,
attention.
all right, that's what I got you,
But
okay.
if you don't mention it, they're not gonna hold it against
Okay,
you.
got you.
Okay.
Any brownie points.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna start off with my coolant reservoir, and here again it holds fluid, right? So it's not cracked, broken, or leaking, and it's properly mounted and secured. This is clear in color, so I can see my fill level. If we happen to get below the fill line and we need to add coolant, here's my fill cap, and we only do so when the engine's cool and not running. Do we ever pop that cap? Okay.
The hose.
Yeah, all my little hoses that run to my coolant reservoir, they're all properly mounted and secured, and there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks on those as well.
Or would it pass if we say I would check that as I did my hoses on the other side, or do we need to call it out?
You can.
Okay.
That'll get you by.
Okay.
Okay. Now on this truck here, we can see our air compressor. This is the air compressor on this day cap. On the sleepers, the air compressor is in the back and you cannot see it. So on this truck, here's our air compressor right here. Okay. And the same thing with our power steering pump. We can see it on this truck. On the sleepers, you cannot. The power steering pump is buried behind the frame. Okay, so on this truck, I can see them, so I'm gonna go ahead and call them out. I'm gonna talk about my air compressor. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. My power steering pump, same thing. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. All my hoses, my regular hoses, and my hydraulic hose to the power steering pump, there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. They're all properly mounted and secured. Okay. So if I was on the sleeper, I would just tell the examiner, back here, which are not visual, are my air compressor and my power steering pump. Both of those, they're not cracked, broken, or leaking. They're properly mounted and secured. And both of those items are gear driven. The same thing I'll say that about this one here. My air compressor, it's gear driven. And my power steering pump, it is also gear driven. Okay. Then I've got my oil dipstick. The way we're gonna check our oil is just like a car. I'm gonna pull out my dipstick, and we don't have to do this on test day. On test day, you're not gonna pull out the dipstick. You're just gonna tell the examiner how you're gonna check it. I'll tell him, I'm gonna pull out my dipstick, wipe it off, reinsert it, pull it out and get a reading on it. If I'm below the fill line, then I'm gonna go ahead and add oil, and here's my oil fill right here. Okay? Coming on back, I've got my steering column. This is my steering column. My steering column. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. I don't have any excess of play in my steering column. On both ends of my steering column, I have U-joints. Both of my U-joints, they're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. In general, all U-joints should be well greased. Some of them have Zerk fittings where you grease them, some of them don't. Okay, so we're just gonna generalize it and say all U-joints should be well greased. Okay, and then right here, I've got my power steering reservoir. Okay, my power steering reservoir. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. I can see my fill line right here as well. And if I get below the fill level, this is where I fill it right here. Same thing, I'm gonna check the hose to my power steering reservoir as well, making sure that there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. It's properly mounted and secured. I've got my gearbox, my power steering gearbox. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. Here's 3 items that we can group together. They're all part of our steering mechanism. We have our pitman arm, our drag link, and then we have our tie rod. The tie rod runs from side to side, okay? You can group all 3 of those together. Tell the examiner I'm gonna check my pitman arm, my drag link, and my tie rod. I wanna make sure all 3 of those, they're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. And everywhere they're linked together, they're secured with a castle nut and a cotter pin. This is the castle nut, and it's got a cotter pin that runs through it, okay?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me. So the group that I was showing, he said you don't have to mention the knuckles. Or,
The upper and
control
lower
arms.
knuckle, or what else do they call
Control
them?
arms.
Yeah.
You don't have to mention
No,
those.
they're not worth points anymore. All they're giving you points for are pitman arm, drag link, and tie rod. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and work on my suspension. We always, anytime we got a suspension, whether it be on the first axle, second and third, in this case, we only got a second axle, or the third axle, or on the sleepers, it's gonna be your fourth and fifth axle. All you gotta do is count tires. First axle, second and third axle, fourth and fifth. So just count tires. My first axle, my second axle, and my third axle, okay? That's how you know how many axles you got. Just count tires, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one, 1, 2, 3, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do my suspension. There's always 5 components to your suspension on every axle. 1, 2, and 3. Every suspension has 5 components, okay? All right. I'm gonna start off with my front spring mount up here. I'm gonna say that there's no missing bolts. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. Then I'm gonna go ahead and check my leaf springs. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're not shifted. They're properly mounted and secured. This truck only has 2 leaf springs. So we are allowed 0 damage whatsoever on our leaf springs. If we get a crack or something on our leaf springs, your truck is red tagged and it cannot move. If you have 4 leaf springs, we're allowed one to be damaged, and technically we're okay. We'd want to get it serviced immediately though, okay? Okay, so there's my leaf spring. Then what holds our leaf springs up is U-bolts. I got 2 U-bolts right here. I'll make sure that there's no missing nuts on the bottom. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. And then I've got a shock absorber. Okay, shock absorbers have hydraulic oil in them, so we have to include not leaking in that description, okay? So my shock absorber, it's not cracked, broken, or leaking, and it's properly mounted and secured on both ends, okay? And then way back in here, we have a rear spring mounted shackle, okay? Rear spring mounted shackle. It's not bent, cracked, or broke. It's properly mounted and secured, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead and do my brake system. Every time we do a brake system, there's 7 components to our brakes, and they are the same 7 components for every axle all the way down, okay? Now, once we get back to the second and third axle, all we have to do is name them, okay? And tell them we're gonna check them the same way as we did on the first axle. There is actually one difference back there on our brakes, and I'll tell you what it is in a second, okay? On the push rod, that's your suspension. On the push rod, up here on the first axle, we're allowed 1 inch of travel on the push rod. And on the second and third, or second and third, we're allowed 2 inches of travel on the push rod. That's because the units are way larger back there, and there is more play, okay? So what they're talking about, that 1 inch of travel, is here's our push rod right here. If I were to go into the truck and hit the brake pedal, that thing comes out like this. They're saying if that travels more than 1 inch, that our brakes are out of adjustment. That's what they're talking about, 1 inch of travel, okay? All right. I know it's a little bit difficult for you guys to see all these components, But when we break up, we can show you the components a little bit better, okay?
Sounds good.
So, the 7 components to my brakes is we have our brake hose, our brake chamber clamp, our push rod, our slack adjuster, our brake drum, and brake lining, okay? So I'm gonna go in that order, I'll work my way down. I'm gonna start off with my brake hose. My brake hose, there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks, and it's properly mounted and secured on both ends. My brake chamber, that holds air, so it's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. My brake chamber clamp, it's in good condition. It's not missing. It's not cracked or broke. It's properly mounted and secured. Then I have my push rod, and the push rod is the forked one. The slack adjuster is the one that's in the middle. The push rod is the one that sticks out like that. So my push rod, it's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted up and secured. Up here on the first axle, we are allowed 1 inch of travel when our brakes are released and pulled by hand, okay? Then I have my slack adjuster. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. Both of those items, my push rod and slack adjuster, they're held in place by cotter pins, okay? Then on the inside, I have my brake drum. My brake drum, it's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. And there's no sign of debris on my brake drum, such as oil or grease, okay? I'm gonna say the same thing about my brake linings as well. My brake linings, they're not cracked or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. They don't have any debris on them, such as oil or grease. And our brake linings, they can be no less than 1/4 of an inch thick at the thinnest spot, okay? Then I'm gonna, I almost forgot my frame. My frame. And you guys could do the same thing too. If you guys are moving along with your pre-trip and you get down here to the hub seal and all of a sudden you remember, shit, I didn't do my power steering pump. You could just, when you get done with your rim or whatever you're doing, just go back and tell the examiner, Mr. Examiner, I missed my power steering pump. I like to claim my point for it. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured, and it is gear driven, okay? So my frame, there's no missing bolts. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. We don't have no illegal holes, no illegal welds in our frame, okay? There's only 2 things that we say there's no illegal welds, no illegal holes. That's our frame and our rim. I catch a lot of people doing their pre-trip all the way down, and they constantly like to say there's no illegal holes, no illegal welds. The only thing we say that about is the frame and the rim, okay? All right, so I did all that. Take a look, make sure I didn't miss nothing, okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and check my tires. I'm gonna check my tires using the ICD method. Like this gentleman stated earlier, it stands for inflation, condition, and depth. I like to go in that order. Inflation, the way I'm gonna check my inflation is with a commercial tire gauge. I'm gonna put it on the valve stem. That's gonna tell me my inflation. On the sidewall, you can always find the manufacturer's specification. That tells us how much air goes in the tire, okay? But that's the way I'm gonna check my inflation, with a commercial tire gauge, put it on the valve stem, that's gonna tell me my inflation. While I'm talking about my valve stem, I'm gonna go ahead and knock it out of the way. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. Your valve stems should always have a DOT valve cap on them, okay? So that covered inflation. Condition.
Is that going to be marked in our test?
What?
The valve stem has to have a cap?
Yeah, it should. Your valve stem should always have a DOT cap on them, okay? All right, so condition, I'll check the outer wall, the inner wall, for any abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. Then I'm gonna check my tire to make sure that it's wearing nice and even. We are not allowed mismatching sizes from side to side. And what they're talking about there is like not a like a Goodyear and a Firestone. That's not a mismatching size. They're talking like if this is a size 20, a
22 and a 24.
Yeah, a 20 and a 22. That's what they're talking about, mismatching sizes. So we're not allowed any mismatching sizes from side to side. Okay, and then like this gentleman said, we are not allowed retreads or recaps up front. The only thing we're allowed to have up front are brand new steer tires, okay? And then the minimum tread depth on our tires is no less than 430 seconds on the front tires. Every tire from here on back, no less than 230 seconds, okay? And all those tires back there, we are allowed to use retreads and recaps back there, okay? So that knocked out my tires. Now I'm gonna go ahead and check my rim. I'm gonna make sure it's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. There's no illegal holes, no illegal welds in my rim, okay? Then I'm gonna go ahead and check my lug nuts and my studs. The lug nut is the nut. The stud is the threaded part, okay? So my lug nuts and studs, none of them are missing. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. I'm gonna check for signs of rust or even shiny metal to metal on my lug nuts. Doesn't always mean it's the case, but it's an indicator we could possibly have one loose, okay? Excess of rust or shiny metal. Then I've got my hub seal, okay? My hub seal. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. You'll hear a lot of people talk about their spider bolts. I don't think they're worth the point, but what the hell, I'll go ahead and talk about them. My little spider bolts, none of them are missing. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. So my hub seal, it's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. The way you check your fluid level in the hub seal is this little rubber cap pops off. If oil spills out, obviously we got oil in there, right? If you pop that cap, nothing comes out, we're supposed to stick our finger in there. Should come up to like the first indentation with some oil. If your finger comes out dry, we need to add 90 weight gear oil. That's the kind of oil that goes in your hub seal. 90 weight gear oil, okay?
You have to specify that, right?
Yes, well, though they might ask you, okay, what kind of oil goes in there? 90 weight gear oil, okay? Now, you guys are actually not going to be doing anything. You're just going to check it. If it gets low on oil, you're going to write it up in your pre-trip and turn it into your maintenance shop. They're going to put the oil in there. As drivers, they really don't want us doing any kind of mechanical work, other than, hey, put some air in the tire if our tires are low. If we notice that our antifreeze or our coolant is running low, then we can put some of that. Or if our oil is low, we can add some of that, because those are the things that'll damage the engine, you know, if they get low. But any other kind of mechanical work, they really don't want us doing. They don't want us touching their trucks. They have certified mechanics to do that stuff.
Or your DEF, huh?
Yeah.
What about, you can put that in there.
Yeah,
right?
DEF, yeah, the DEF fluid, yeah. Okay? So what I just finished, what I just did for you, we consider Section 8. We break it up into 3 sections for training purposes. Like I said, when you guys do your pre-trip, you're gonna do the whole truck. But we break it up into 3 sections, so as during the course of your school, if we wanna test you on a section to see how your progress is coming along, and we are gonna spot check you guys, give you guys grades and stuff, so we see where your progress is, we just did Section 8, okay? Section B is gonna run from the marker light, everything in between, all the way to the back of the tail lights on the tractor. And then the trailer and everything back is Section C. Okay? All right, so we just did Section 8. Now I'm gonna go ahead and move on down. This is a marker light. Now, in case you guys get confused, what is a clearance light, what is a marker light, because basically those are the 2 main lights we have on the truck. I always like to tell everybody, everything above my head are clearance lights. Everything waist high that runs down the truck are marker lights. Okay? Got it? Clearance lights, marker lights. So when you tell me, hey Tommy, what's that light called? It's a marker light, waist high. Everything above your head, clearance lights. Okay? All right. So my marker light, same thing like my indicator. I call it a marker light. Amber in color, not cracked or broke, properly mounted, secured. It should be in good working condition. This one here also serves as a turn signal and a 4-way flasher, okay? Then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do my mirror bracket out here. When we do our in-cab inspection, we do our mirrors. So out here on the outside of the truck, I just gotta cover the bracket, okay? Because I've already done the mirrors when I did my in-cab inspection. Not unless you missed your mirrors when you done your in-cab, you can still claim your mirrors out here and still get that point. So, my mirror bracket, there's no missing bolts. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. Then I'll check the overall condition of my door, making sure there's no major damage, no major bulges. My door should open and close properly, okay? Then I've got my door handle and I've got door hinges, okay? So my door handle, it's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. My door hinges, there's no missing bolts. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. My door has weather stripping all the way around it. It's got weather stripping all around the door, the seals of the door, okay? I'll just make sure that they're not dry rotted, they're not frayed, they're not missing any pieces. This way water doesn't come in my truck, okay?
Can you just say rubber seal?
Yeah, you can say the rubber seal. That's
Rubber
fine.
seal.
Weather stripping, rubber seal on our door, same thing, okay? Okay. From there, I'm gonna talk about my DEF tank. Our DEF tank, it's abbreviated as well. DEF tank stands for diesel exhaust fluid. Okay, anybody know what it is? You know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Like stuff you put in, or they give you a ticket.
No, you don't get no ticket if you run out of DEF, your truck is gonna quit running. They don't give a shit. You want to run it dry and get stuck on the road? That ain't their business. It's not illegal.
The governor will kick on it. Will keep you under 50. Right?
No. Throw him to the end. Drug test his ass again. Fucking drug his test his ass again. So DEF is diesel exhaust fluid. Okay. Diesel exhaust fluid is all about emissions. Okay. It's cleaning up. Remember in the old days, you used to see all that black smoke coming out of the smoke pipes and stuff. Well, they started cracking down on all the emissions. So they had everybody put DEF systems on their truck. It actually really isn't good for the truck. It clogs it up. It's like a Cadillac converter. It's catching it's cleaning shit up, but it's congesting your truck. It doesn't let your truck really breathe well and all that stuff. So, but DEF fluid is a high concentration of ammonia. When you put in DEF fluid, you're gonna smell cow piss. It's a high concentrate of ammonia. So as your truck is running, it mixes with the diesel fuel, runs through the engine, runs through the exhaust, and then right after the exhaust is your DPF filter. That's capturing all that black stuff. So the DEF fluid is help cleaning it up, breaking it down, and then once it gets to the DPF filter, that's capturing it and not letting it escape out of your truck.
That's what I'm telling you. That thing gets real hot. It burns up all that soot that will come out. That's why I'm putting those tanks over there.
Especially when you regen your truck,
when you
then
regen.
it gets hotter than hell.
It's real hot.
Yeah.
Now, when these trucks tell you, they do tell you when you got to regen.
You'll get a light on your
warning, huh?
on your dash.
And you got
Looks like a
limited
little
time.
missile if you're playing digital games.
Yeah.
It looks like a little missile, and then you just find the button on the dash that matches the same indicator that's on your dash. And so when your truck needs to be regen, that light will come on. So when that light comes on, we've got some time. We probably got about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, maybe even an hour of run time. But you need to think about finding a decent place to park, and then you put your truck in neutral, set the brakes, and hold down that button that has the same indicator until you hear the RPMs kicking up in the truck. And then once it levels out, just take your finger off the button, and when it is done, it'll idle back down by itself. Okay?
If you don't do that and you keep driving, your
Your
truck
truck
is going to go into
limp mode.
Limp mode.
Yeah.
And it's
It'll-
only going to move like about
5 miles an
an
hour.
hour.
Or some of them even start shutting themselves off.
Yeah.
You can restart it, but as soon as you put it in drive and try to go, it's going to shut itself back down.
The new
So-
Fords, they go 50 miles an hour.
Excuse me?
The Ford trucks with DEF system, they
Uh-huh.
won't let you go past 50 after you run out of fluid.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I know the trucks, they're gonna
The
they're gonna
regen is
they're
what
gonna
we're
go
talking
down.
about when that
Pardon me?
DPF filter.
Some
is
do
burning
while they're
up
on the
all
road, but they still do
soot,
have a regen button. So
all
you,
the black shit.
as you're
it's
running on the
burning it up,
freeway,
it's cleaning it before it
they
sends it out
regen
to the
themselves
air.
sometimes, but
Oh,
sometimes
I see, okay.
that light still may come on, depending on. Like if you're doing a lot of city driving, like our trucks here, the ones that we leave in the yard, they don't get to blow themselves out. So we have to regen those actually quite frequently. The more you're on the freeway and blowing that stuff
I
out,
don't
the
know
less
if
the
it, I
truck
think
has to
it's
regen.
separate, but this is where this is it right here.
Yeah,
but it cleans
yeah.
it
Some our trucks do as well. If it's sitting there idling, it'll just go in there without you hitting the button.
Why is it green thing?
Because it really, really needs a regen when it does it by itself. That means I'm not going to give you an hour to pull over. I need to regen now, so it went into a regen by itself. But they should still have a button on there where you manually do it when the light comes on. Okay? Okay. So my def tank, you cannot mix up the fuel because they're at the same pump. Diesels, the diesel fuel, it's got a big old nozzle on it like a freaking water hose. Okay, the DEF, it's got a real small one, and the DEF, you cannot stick a diesel nozzle. It'll go in here, but oh, this one you can. Ooh, most of them are not like this. Most of them.
It's blue though too.
The hose, yes, they're either blue or green, either blue or green. So you really don't want to mix them up because it'll do damage.
And
Okay.
you also can buy those if you go to the counter. Some stores it's like
Yeah.
a gallon or
If,
3 gallons.
like 3 gallons. If
3
you're
gallon, like
if
a
you're
fuel
not
stop.
at a fuel stop, if you're not at a big fuel station and you really need DEF, well then you're a jackass because you let it run too low. And then you're going to be stuck in like you said, a Circle K or something like that.
Right.
They do sell it in it's a box, yeah. It'll be in a cardboard. Most of them are 15 gallons.
Okay.
So at the fuel station, they have diesel and they have DEF. Your company's going to have a policy. They're gonna tell you every 5th time you fill up, we want you to put DEF whether it needs it or not. They don't want you to run out. Okay? Or if you once you get the 2 bars of DEF on your gas, we want you to fill up. They're gonna have a policy on it. They're not just gonna let you run it out, and then they gotta go rescue you. They're gonna have a policy.
Now,
They're
how's it actually run? Is it pumped like another pump that pumps it?
Yes,
into the engine?
it's so
Like
you
a fuel
got
pump?
a diesel nozzle, and then to come over and get your DEF, typically you got to lift up a plastic glass, and then you can pull out your DEF thing. And it's the diesel will be a black hose, the DEF will either be a blue or a green hose.
What I'm saying is, how's it work in the engine? Does it match up with the fuel? The diesel
Yeah,
fuel?
it mixes with the diesel fuel, runs through the engine, runs through the exhaust, and then
Okay.
the DPF filter will capture.
So it has a separate pump that pumps the DEF tank, right?
Well, the DEF's got a tank. I'm not a fucking mechanic.
Okay,
I can't tell you how it works. I know that if I run out of DEF, I'm gonna be in trouble.
Right.
that much I know, but I don't know the mechanical ends of it.
Yeah.
I do know, like I said, it does run through the engine. It mixes
That's what
with
I wanted- that's what
it
I
mixes
was
with the
asking.
diesel. It starts breaking it down. So this way, when it runs through the exhaust, the DPF filter is gonna capture the result.
That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, okay. I can give you that answer. But man, don't tell me what HO2 plus CO2. What does it equal? Shit, I don't
I'm
know.
with you on that, Charlie.
Like I said, I already told you once I didn't finish high school. Goddammit. That's why I'm a truck driver. All right, so my DEF tank. It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. I'll make sure that my cap is properly mounted and secured as well, and I'm not leaking at the cap. Our DEF fluid should never get no lower than 1/8 of a tank. Okay, and 1/8 of a tank. There's 4 bars in there. There's 4 little green squares. When all 4 of them are lit up, you're full. When you got 3 squares, that's 3/4 of a tank. 2 squares, half a tank. 1 square, that's 1/4 of a tank. You better start putting DEF fluid in there. Okay. Okay. Also, when we were talking about the regenning of the truck, remember I was telling you it'll come on orange on your dash? If that thing starts flashing, you better pull over right now and regen your truck, because once it starts flashing, that's telling you your truck is getting ready to go down. Okay? So that's what it does right before it goes into limp mode on you. Is it'll start blinking. First it'll come on solid, then like we said, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, you better start looking for some place to pull over and regen. If it starts flashing, I don't care where you're at, you better pull over and regen that thing, because it's gonna leave you stuck. All right? So there's that. Now I've got my steps. I've got my side steps here. There's no missing bolts. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. There's no slippery substances on my steps. If I just say slippery substances, it covers it all. Ice, water, grease, oil. If you just say slippery substances, that covers it all. That's all they want to hear. Okay? Is that? Now I'm working my way back. Section B. We're still in Section B. When I started doing that marker light, I was in the Section B. Okay, so I've got my fuel tank. And please don't call it a gas tank, because he'll laugh at you. You put gas in cars, you put diesel fuel in trucks. So it is a fuel tank, okay? It's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's properly mounted and secured. I'll make sure that my cap is also properly mounted and secured. And I want to make sure I'm not leaking at the cap as well. All the caps have a little rubber seal on the inside. When that seal goes bad, that's when you start leaking at the cap. Also, your cap should always have a chain and a T-bar on it. That prevents us from losing our caps. When you open these things, we have locks on all of these, and I don't have keys. But when you open these, it's got a chain and a T-bar, so it'll hang right there. This way you do not lose them. Okay. Also, I got 2 fuel tank straps. I'll just make sure they're not bent, cracked, or broken. They're properly mounted and secured. And then we have insulation on our fuel tank straps. Make sure that's in decent condition so we don't get any metal-to-metal contact on our fuel tank straps, okay? Okay. Then I'm gonna go ahead and cover my catwalk and my steps again. I'm gonna check my catwalk and my steps the same way I did on my side steps right here. We get to cheat that, okay? Also, we have to do frame and exhaust one more time back here. Technically, this is where the points are for your frame, your exhaust, and your DPF filter. This is where it's scored, but the examiners do like to hear it up front as well, okay? But when you say it back here, this is where they score you and give you the points for it. So I'm gonna cheat this again. My frame back here in the middle of my truck, I'm gonna check the frame the same way I did in the engine compartment, okay? Because I've already detailed it up there, I don't need to detail it again. And then the same thing with my exhaust and my DPF filter. I'll take a look at them back here one more time, and I'm gonna check those the same way I did up in the engine compartment, okay? Underneath the catwalk is our drive shaft. You can see it on that one, I believe. If you look right down in the middle of the truck, there's that big black metal bar, big black tube, right? You see that big black tube? Look down where your catwalk is.
Right here.
That's your drive shaft. Yeah.
Drive shaft. This right here. And it's got differential on the end.
It's easy to misunderstand.
This.
Dry shaft.
This your dry shaft.
This.
Drive shaft.
Dry shaft. Thank you.
On both ends of our drive shaft, we have U-joints. Make sure those are not bent, cracked, or broken. They don't have any debris wrapped around them. And all U-joints should be well greased. Okay? Okay. Now, if you want, while we're here, I can cover my airlines. Airlines are technically part of our coupling system. Okay? So me personally, when I'm doing it, I like to leave my airlines to when I do my whole coupling system. But if you want, and you're right here, you can go ahead and do them. Okay, it's your prerogative. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave them for last when I do my whole coupling system. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on. We do not talk about this splash guard right here. We talk about that splash guard. Okay. I know everybody knows them as mud flaps, but on the examiner's grading sheet, it does say splash guard. So we should probably be politically correct and call it a splash guard. Okay. Like I said, it is a freaking mud flap, but DOT named them splash guards. So we're gonna stick with splash guard. Okay.
We want that point.
Yes, we want that point. All right. Now, we get to start cheating things a lot back here, okay? So, I like to start from the furthest back, which is my suspension, brakes, tires, rims, lug nuts, la da da. We've got to do everything back here that we did up front, but we get to start cheating it, okay? So, my suspension. Remember I told us that there's always 5 components to our suspension, right?
Right.
I'm going to name them first. I can see them better on that truck. Can we see them better on that truck than we can here?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can see them here as well too. And if you look right down here, you can see your shock absorber, your U-bolts. Okay, so I'm gonna name all the components that we have on our suspension here. We've got a spring mount. Instead of leaf springs, we have a torque spring. We've got a shock absorber. We've got U-bolts. And instead of a rear spring mounted shackle, we've got an airbag. Okay? So this is the way I'm going to cheat it. I'm going to tell the examiner. I'm going to go ahead and check my suspension on the second axle. So there's my spring mount. There's my leaf springs. The shock absorber, it's behind the tire. You can probably see it looking down there. I can see it looking in here, okay? So, I'm gonna tell the examiner, I'm gonna check my suspension on my second axle. There's 3 components I could check the same way I did in the front. So this is one of the difference on the videos that you've seen me make. The videos from 2020, the other video that you've seen me on. And this is one of those minor changes that they made. They now want us to name all the components instead of just naming the differences. They want us to name all 5 components to our suspension. So that's the way we do it. I'm gonna check my suspension on the second axle. There's 3 items I'm gonna check the same way I did in the front. My spring mount, my U-bolts, and my shock absorber. So I don't have to detail those again. And then I'm gonna tell the examiner the 2 differences that I have in my suspension back here. One, instead of leaf springs, I now have a torque spring. So instead of 2 thinner ones, there's just one nice thick one back here. So they call it a torque spring. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. And then back here, instead of a rear spring mounted shackle, we now have an airbag. Okay? An airbag. And my airbag is rubber. So my airbag, there's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. It's properly mounted and secured. Okay?
What exactly is the airbag?
Right here, my friend. Just rub this big black rubber right there. See it?
Word, okay.
That's an airbag.
Word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On the day cabs,
I've been hearing it all day, but
that's an airbag. On the day cabs, you can really feel. On the sleepers, you can't feel them like you can on the day cabs. But since this truck has been sitting all day, when I fire it up, when it gets to about 75 psi, you're gonna see that truck go. That airbag fills up. You won't feel it on the sleepers like you do on these day cabs. But when you're in the day cab, you're gonna be firing up, and then don't freak out because that thing's gonna go. Whoop. You're gonna say, "Oh shit, I got hydraulics, baby." Yeah. But yeah, so we got the airbags on this, okay? All right. So one more time, I'm gonna check my suspension on my second axle or my second and third axle, and they're the same components. There's 3 components I'm going to check the same way as I did my first axle. My spring mount, my shock absorber, and my U-bolts. The 2 differences I have in my suspension, instead of leaf springs, I now have a torque spring. It's not bent, cracked, broken, properly mounted, secured. And instead of a rear spring mounted shackle, I now have an airbag. No abrasions, bubbles, cuts, or leaks. It's properly mounted and secured. Okay? Suspension.
So you don't have to do the tension bar. What's the tension bar?
Spring mount real good.
Excuse me?
A tension bar. You have to mention that one.
There ain't no such thing as a tension bar.
There isn't.
What is the tension bar?
It's in between the frames. To the other end of the frame.
No. Oh, I know what you're talking about. No, it's not part of the test. It's not worth any points.
Okay.
What the hell is an equalizer?
Equalizer, I'm gonna get to it. That's on the 4th and 5th axle. That's on the 4th and 5th axle back there, on the trailer. So let me, I'm working my way back there. Right now, I'm only on the 2nd.
It's on page 14.
Yeah. You're getting a little bit ahead of me.
I was just trying to find where you was at.
You're putting the cart in front of the horse. You ain't gonna get very far like that.
Good looking though, D.
You gonna go backwards a long way though. Okay? Yeah, you're just getting a little bit ahead of me. The equalizer is on the 4th and 5th axle. And equalizer is only on longer trailers. On these day cabs, the 28-foot trailers, they don't have an equalizer. I'll show it to you over there, okay?
So we have this for testing, we don't have to mention equalizer.
That's a fact. Or the tandem release. Because these smaller trailers don't have a tandem release either. I'll also explain to you what that's for back there, okay? Let me get here and we're gonna get back there, okay? Alright, so I did my suspension. Now I'm gonna do my brakes. Anybody see their brakes? Oh, they're easy to miss. But they're worth 4 points every set of brakes. 4, 8, 12. So if you miss them on your second, or your second and third, or if you miss them on your third, or your 4th and 5th, if you forget your brakes, that's 8 points. 8 points you're gonna leave on the table. So don't forget, we gotta do our brakes, okay? Remember I was telling you, they're the same 7 components. Memorize your brakes because you cannot see them down here. So the brakes you really need to memorize, all 7 components. We're only given 4 points from, but we got to talk about the 7 components, okay? So, my brakes, I'm going to tell the examiner, I'm going to check my brakes on this truck, my 2nd axle, or my brakes on my 2nd and 3rd axle, the same way I did on the 1st. All 7 components. Name your components. That's another difference on the video. So, now they want us to name all the components. On the video, on the older video, I say I'm gonna check my brakes the same way I did on the 1st axle, except I have one difference. I'm now allowed 2 inches of travel on the push rod instead of 1. Now they want us to name all 7 components. So that's another slight difference from the video. Okay. Like I said, you do that video is damn near. I mean, it's good enough to get your license, but there are minor changes that they made. Okay. So I'm gonna check my brakes, in this case, on my 2nd axle, the same way I did on the 1st axle. My brake hose, brake chamber, brake clamp, push rod, slack adjuster, brake drum, and brake lining. And I have one difference on my brakes. I'm now allowed 2 inches of travel on my push rod instead of 1. Okay, that's how we do our brakes back there. Cool? Yeah. Nice and easy, right? Okay.
Now, Tom, is that the same as you mentioned
With the brakes release and pull by hand? No, we set it up there, so we don't need to say it back here again. All we have to do is tell them that's the one difference. I'm now allowed 2 inches of travel on a push rod instead of 1. Up there, up front, I said when my brakes are released and pulled by hand already, I don't need to say it no more, okay? Okay. Then I'm gonna go ahead and check my tires back here. I'm gonna check my tires on my 2nd axle or my 2nd and 3rd axle, the same way I did on the 1st axle using the ICD method. I do have 3 differences back here on my tires that I need to name them. Okay? I don't gotta go through the whole ICD business, but I gotta give them the 3 differences on my tires. So one more time, I'm gonna check my tires on my 2nd axle or my 2nd and 3rd axle, the same way I did on the 1st, but I've got 3 differences on my tires. One difference is we are now allowed to use retreads and recaps. That's one difference. The second difference is